Good evening to everybody. Tonight we will have, I don't know what happened. I lost. Tonight we will learn Torah, Le'ili Nishmas Arieleb ben Yitzchak Michal, and that is because it's his yahrzeit today. It is my mother's father. And we will also study today in the merit, in the schus of Refuah Shalema for Dvar Leah Bas Yafa Liba. Refuah Shalema. And this is a portion, Toldot, or Toldos, that is really, really interesting, very powerful, and has a lot of blessings in it. This is the first portion of the Torah that a human being gives a very, very powerful, long-lasting blessing, and that was the blessing of Isaac to his son Yaakov, thinking it was Esav, but we'll get to that part of the story. But it's a famous blessing that we actually say every single Saturday night at the end of Shabbat to give blessings to our week. So it's the first and really most prominent teaching to us that we do have the responsibility to carry on blessings from those who gave us blessings and to pass them on to our children, to the next generation. Good evening, Jen, how are you? So Parshas Toldos begins with just reminding us that Yitzchak was the son of Avraham, and Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. Just to remind us where it came from. Sorry, two more chairs there, thank you. Now, why does the Torah have to remind us this? Do you think that we weren't around for the last couple of weeks and we didn't get any lost a piece of the equation, lost a piece of the story? No, it knows that we know that Avraham, because that was last week, was a massive story. The Yitzchak was born. It's 2 weeks ago. Last week he got married. So why are we hearing it again? So Rashi points out, and let's actually take a look inside. On 155, verse 19, the following Yaakov and Esav, whose births are presently to be recounted, are the descendants of Isaac, the son of Abraham. Although Abraham was also the father of Ishmael, his life's work was perpetuated by virtue of the fact that he was a father of Isaac, who remained loyal to Abraham's moral legacy. What the Torah wanted to say is you have two types of children. You have a biological child, and you have a spiritual child. Lubavitcher Rebbe did not have any biological children. He wasn't blessed with children, but he always used to say, I was blessed with many, many, many spiritual children. We have a custom before Yom Kippur to bless our children. Some people do it every Friday night, but at the very least, before Yom Kippur starts, bless your children. He would go into the synagogue and all of the boys were there. All of the yeshiva students were there. And he would give them a blessing as if they were his own kids. And it was a very, very powerful moment. He would throw his talus over his head and give a very, very beautiful blessing that they should succeed in their studies and so on. When we have a descendant, when we have a continuation, as we discussed last week about Chayei Sarah, the way in which we can ensure that this is not just a child by biology, but it's a child by all that we've transmitted, values, is what we see here with Avraham. Avraham gave birth. Yitzchak was the son of Avraham, but Avraham holid as Yitzchak, gave birth to Yitzchak, which means everything that Avraham lived with, he passed on to Yitzchak, and Yitzchak continued. Yes, he had Yishmael as well, but Yishmael didn't absorb and didn't accept all of the teachings of his father. He wanted to lead a different life, a bit of a wild life. And so the Torah is making it clear that in case one day there'll be a group of people that come along and say, we're descendants of Ishmael and he was the oldest child. Where do you know that? Where do you know that? We ask them. Because it says in the Bible. That's how we know. Oh, you're looking in the Bible? Let's look at the next Torah portion where it says that although Ishmael was the oldest and first child, the continuation of the legacy and most importantly, the inheritance of the blessings came through Abraham to Yitzchak. Good evening. Let me get another chair. Let's pause. Get one more from the garage. Okay. Put Frank on this side. Oh, thank you. Okay. All right, who thinks they're skilled at that? So it actually is a similar question when somebody asked me, who would Jews, how do we know that Jews are supposed to marry Jews? Like, what's wrong with interfaith marriages? And so if you ever get that question, which is a tough one, because some of our kids also might be looking outside the boundaries and so on. So you have to say, look, there's friends, there's relationships, there's partnerships, but marriage is a very interesting thing, because you actually don't need to get married. There is no real good reason to get married.
Now you tell me.
Think about it. If you want to live with somebody, you don't need to be married to live with them. You want to have a joint bank account, you can become partners with them. If you want to have children, you don't need to be married. But who even wants to have children nowadays? But all the reasons that are given for marriage, you could do without marriage. And it actually is not very romantic to have a contract which commits you to the other person. What happened to pure love? You need me to write it down on a piece of paper and sign and seal with a judge or a rabbi? Come on. I love you. You should take my word for it. Well, you need me to put it in writing? So the only reason we do get married, and this just so happens to be, marriage is officiated by a clergy, whether it's a rabbi or a priest or some other cleric, because the Torah says that when you are together, man and woman together, you sanctify the union in holy matrimony. That is the only reason you actually get married. Otherwise, it's just a partnership of some kind, whichever level you choose to make it. But marriage itself, where you're tied to the other person in that kind of way, is because the Torah says so. Torah says to make it holy. And how do you do it? With a ring, all the customs as we know, even outside the Jewish faith. So then, if the Torah is the one telling you to get married, shouldn't you follow the Torah with the rest of the rules? Like, Torah, the only reason you're getting married is because it's from a biblical source. Then look to the biblical source as to who to marry, and how that home should be, and how you should have and conduct that home. Now, it just so happens to be that there's, the Torah gives all the options and openings for conversions, and the mother's Jewish, the children are Jewish, and all those things are together. But it's very interesting that when you look at one thing of the Torah, it's got to be consistent with other areas of the Torah as well. So when you follow the Torah to say Yishmael was the son of Abraham, he deserves the inheritance. All right, you got that from the Torah, but the rest of the Torah says that it was given to Yitzchak in this week's Torah portion. You can't just pick and choose. Once you're using the Torah as your valid proof. Just on a side point, Parshas Toldos.
Yeah, I should just tell you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find it in this one.
It's 156, 157.
But this is that they have the old. Oh, you
Yeah.
got the old book. Yeah, good. Thank you, Jen.
What is it?
156.
Thank you.
For the Hebrew 157.
Now, they were married for some time. Yitzchak and Rivka got married last week's Torah portion. And now we shift the story to them. This is their portion, by the way. Yitzchak and Rivka's portion, where we see them start their family, raise their first Jewish home from the beginning. Avram and Sarah did this from a little bit in. They were, so to speak, converts or Baalei Tshuva. But Yitzchak and Rivka from the get-go. So they couldn't have children for a while, as is the case with every single one of the mothers of the Jewish people except for Leah. Leah is the only one that had kids right away. because she had suffered enough that she was almost the not chosen one. She felt a little bit, sort of pushed to the side. So Hashem blessed her to have children right away. But all the others, Sarah, Rivka, and Rachel, all didn't have children for the first part of their marriage. And you have to look at that and say there's a reason. There's a reason. And the reason is given is because each of them prayed and each of them taught us that Hashem wants that relationship to ask. And Rivka got a little bit upset because she said, why am I not having children? And what happened was that Isaac said, I'll daven to Hashem, I'll pray to Hashem. And Rivka said, I'm going to find out what I can do to ask for children. I'm also going to pray to Hashem. It's an interesting thing. If Hashem wants to give you blessings, why doesn't he just give you blessings? So there's a story, and Alan remembers this because I've told it before, but I want to say it again because it's I haven't said it in a long time, and it's very relevant to this particular thing. There was a fellow who was a very righteous man, but he was not of means. He didn't have a lot of business. He didn't have a lot of wealth, and he was struggling to make ends meet. And his wife was always, happy, although once in a while she'd say, it'd be nice if the kids could have more clothes. We could have some furniture in the house. And he's like, but it's okay. Everything is good. We have enough. Hashem is good. He gives us what we need. One day, the Baal Shem Tov was passing through his town. And the Baal Shem Tov was everyone knew him already by that point as the illustrious leader of Hasidus. And the Baal Shem Tov had requested that he wanted to stay for Shabbos by this Jew's home. Can you imagine? This Jew was like, I'm just a regular, ordinary Joe. And the Baal Shem Tov and his whole entourage wants to stay in my house. He tells his wife, we're going to do it. We're going to have them, and we don't have any food, but we have one cow. We're going to slaughter the cow, and we're going to make enough meat for everyone to enjoy the whole Shabbos. And whatever else we have, we're going to serve. To have the Baal Shem Tov in our house. He didn't think about Sunday. He didn't think about the next day, how he'd make a living. He wasn't thinking about that. He was just like, I've got to make a beautiful Shabbos for the Baal Shem Tov and his crew. Baal Shem Tov comes. It was the most uplifting Shabbos. They stayed in his house. They were singing Friday night at the table. There were about 15 other followers of his number one students were all there. And they're singing. And at the end of the meal, Baal Shem Tov says, do you have any more of that meat? It was really good. Could I have some more of that meat? Said, oh, absolutely. Brings out more meat. The next day, they pray, and it's inspiring, and it's beautiful Shabbos meal. And the Baal Shem Tov at the end of the Shabbos meal says, do you have anything else to eat? We're still a little bit hungry. It's a little odd for the Baal Shem Tov, such a spiritual giant, to be asking for food. But okay, the Baal Shem Tov is asking for food. I'll find something. She opens the cupboards, pulls out more meat. Now it's like already leftovers, parts of not such a choice parts of the meat. Brings it all out. And then later in the afternoon, when they finished their Torah and their classes and their singing, it was time for Shalosh Shudas, the last part of the meal. Last part of Shabbos, you have a third meal. He had almost nothing left to give, but he put out whatever left he had on the table. And Baal Shem Tov said, that's it? You don't have any more food than that? We're starving. We need more food. You sure you don't have anything else? He says, I'll give you whatever I have. And he goes into his closets and he finds like an old can of sardines or something, like a small pack of crackers, pulls it out. And Baal Shem Tov said, nothing else? That's all you have? That's all I have. That's everything. You ate my whole cow. You ate everything. He says, okay, well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you giving me all this food. And they sang and they talked. And it was on such a high when they left after Shabbos. It was on such a high. He tells his wife, could you believe we had the Baal Shem Tov? We had the Baal Shem Tov, and it's such a blessing to us. He looks around and he sees he's got nothing left. He's got no job because he lost his cow, which he would take to milk and make cheese out of. And he would now had no food in his house. And the kids started to cry a little bit Sunday morning. Started to cry, they wanted food. He's like, what do I do? It's like for the first time in his life, he said, you know what? I have to daven, to pray to Hashem. Closes his eyes, he starts davening to Hashem. He said, please, I never asked you for anything. But now it's the first time in my life I really, really need a blessing. I really need your help. I need your help. I need something to feed my family. As he's finishing his prayer, there was a carriage that was pulling up to his front of his house. and two very good-looking businessmen, wealthy businessmen, come out, and they say, "Are you Reb Yankel?" He says, "Yes, I'm Reb Yankel." So, "Well, we heard you're a very honest guy. Someone told us when we're looking around the town for an honest guy, somebody said Reb Yankel is the honest guy." See, we're business partners our whole life for 40 years, and now we're going our own separate ways. And we needed to divide all of our assets. But, for us to do it ourselves, someone's going to take a little bit more, someone's going to take a little less. We have all the paperwork, we have all of our assets. We need you as an honest guy to be the one to arbitrate between us, to divide our assets evenly. It takes some time because there's a lot of different documents. But if you do this, we'll give you 10% of our entire business asset portfolio as a thank you, gratitude for doing this. And we have to give it to charity anyway, 10%. So we'll give it to you. He sits down the whole day. He splits up this. The carriage is worth that. The house is worth this. And clothes are worth this. He's dividing the value. He's saying, no, you don't forget about this. He's moving everything. And he's figuring out exactly how much is in everything. And he splits it up at the end. They give him a whole bag full of rubles. Say, this is for your efforts. It's a small fortune. It's a small fortune. He turns to his wife and he says, this is it. We're good to go for the rest of our lives. We have enough money. 10% of these two wealthy businessmen is enough to live off forever. And then he says right away, the Baal Shem Tov. It was his blessing when he was in the house. That's why. So he went on a horse and carriage and he went to visit the Baal Shem Tov to thank him for visiting his home and what a great blessing it had caused. Baal Shem Tov smiled. He said, I'm so happy that you were blessed with money to survive, to live, provide for your family, but it wasn't my blessing at all. It was your blessing. You see, there was a lot of blessings waiting to be bestowed upon you by Hashem, but you were never asking for it. So he didn't give it to you. You never requested. So Hashem said, if you're not requesting, why should I give it? I had to come to your house and I had to eat you out of house and home. I had to polish off every single thing you had in your closet. So you would be forced to ask Hashem for the blessings that you were waiting to receive, that was rightfully yours, that was waiting to flow down to you. So finally I did that and you were forced to pray. And when you asked, Hashem gave. So my friends, this is what Hashem is telling us with Rivka, with Sarah, with Rachel, in the first stories of the Torah. He's waiting to give us more blessings than we can imagine. But he wants us to ask. He wants a relationship. He doesn't want just, you should come there. It's like the same thing with business and fundraising. You can't just expect and wait for people to just hand over donations. You have to make a pitch. You have to say, this is why we need you. This is what I need. This is what I want. Oh, this is what you want. I didn't know. I thought you were getting supported by headquarters at 770 or something. Was giving you everything you needed. But now, the request is what makes the bond. If you need me, I'll be there for you. If you didn't need me, and you're going to sort it all out yourself, or even just hoping for the best, you're not going to automatically trigger Hashem's benevolence. So they had to ask, and that's why it says that Isaac pleaded with God on one corner of the room, while his wife did the same at the opposite corner of the room, for she was barren. And even though they both prayed intensely, it says God responded. Now, this is Rashi says, God responded to Isaac's plea. Now, there's a reason given why it says that. And this is another very beautiful idea. First of all, Yitzchak was a righteous man. Obviously, his prayers were Hashem listens to the righteous. That's why we go to the Rebbe, because the Rebbe is the righteous praying on our behalf, is like an extra bonus, extra merit. We don't have enough merits that Hashem should listen to us. But if a tzaddik is praying, it adds the extra merit. But it was more than that. When you pray for somebody else, your prayers are answered first. If you have 3 prayers you want to say this Shabbos or this week, and 2 of them are for you, and 1 of them is for somebody else, even if it's a close family member, Hashem will listen first, or answer first, the one for somebody else. Because, wow, you're selflessly caring about somebody else to use your prayers for them? That's what Hashem loves to see. And I'll tell you, the trick works with your kids too. If your child comes to you and says, could you help out my sister? Could you help out my brother? Parents are like, oh, you know what? It's such a nice thing that you're asking for that. think I'll do that. But if the child says, could I have it? Could I have it for myself? No, it's like, no, you don't deserve it yet. So it's a very real and powerful thing. And you could make arrangements, and this is what the Tehillim groups are. You pray for me, I'll pray for you, we'll pray for each other, we'll each have other people in mind, and each one has a much quicker answer rate because it's for somebody else. So that's one of the reasons it says.
So if I pray for a child, my own child, that's praying for someone else.
Who's praying for Rivka to get pregnant?
I'm just saying, if I make a prayer.
Oh, for your own child.
My own child,
Yeah.
let's pray for someone else.
If it's for their well-being and for their blessing to be answered. For example, let's say your daughter comes and says, I really would need this blessing right now. And you say, I'm going to pray for you to get that blessing. But let's say you want her to do something that you want her to do, right? And you say, I just pray that she'll wake up and do what I am asking. That's a personal prayer. So we actually touched on that on Shabbos when we said you respect your parents when they are asking for honor for themselves, but when they're telling you what to do, it's not required because it's your own choice.
Wasn't Yitzchak also like barren? He couldn't have children. So in essence, wasn't he praying for himself?
It's true, but he was too. But it was specifically that that if you think about just the basic facts of it, it's the woman who has to conceive and become pregnant. Like she has to be the one carrying the child. So it seemed like the mother carried, rightfully or wrongfully, it's before like genetic testing and IVF and all these things where you could say it was the man's fault or whatever the deficiency was. It seemed like the burden was being carried much more by the woman, and it was emphasized by the father, who Abraham, when he wanted to have a child, had Hagar conceive the child right away, and it was Sarah who was praying. So at that point, you could say Abraham was certainly praying for Sarah because he already had his own child. But yeah, you're right. It's touch and go that it's close to you, but that's the insinuation. So then she got pregnant, but then you have this amazing little in vitro experience that she was going through, and the Torah tells us that the children struggled within her, not knowing she was carrying twins. And this, by the way, is one of the most famous lines when it comes to understanding ourselves. Who am I and what is going on inside of me? That it seems that every time I'm going to a holy place, my child is kicking and getting excited. And every time I go to an unholy place, my child is kicking and getting excited. Now, I can't speak to this, never pregnant. But I don't know if any women here who had pregnancies felt that there was something that would excite the baby at certain times. Maybe it's a food that they ate. Maybe it's music that was being played. I don't know if anyone was as sensitive to pick up on the subtleties of what could be that could make the child in utero, get excited because they had no real awareness other than just a feeling, maybe some kind of subtle feeling. But Rivka was obviously very in tune with what was going on inside of her and felt that there was excitement by the holy place and excitement by the unholy place. And she was very bothered because there's nothing worse than a child who is both, like is going to be neither here nor there, in this world and in that world. And the same thing, by the way, as Hasidus tells us about ourselves. That when do we get really bothered about ourselves is when we have two forces fighting inside of us. One day we wake up, I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to be a good person. I'm going to do more mitzvahs. And the other day, we're like, I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to be, who cares about all that? I'm going to be greedy. I'm going to, I'll be a glutton today, be lazy today. I'm not going to bother about mitzvahs, right? And then we get all bothered. Who am I? Who am I? Am I the good person that does mitzvahs? Or am I this lazy person? It's like, when somebody gives you a compliment and you're like, oh, no, please, it's okay. You know why you're saying that? Because you don't believe them, that you're such a good person. You think, well, I know myself. I know what person I can be if I really don't act, like the proper way. I can be pretty, rough and tumble in the safety of my own home, right? Without anyone knowing. But that causes us a lot of what's called agmas nefesh, a lot of self turbulence, to reflection in a way that like, I don't really know which one I really am. Am I selfish, arrogant, angry person? Or am I the kind, generous, good-hearted person? And so what's important to know is that we have two parts to us. We have the godly soul and we have the animal soul. And once you know you have twins inside you, it's like, oh, okay. All right, now I know I've got to just allow my godly soul to be victorious most of the time. It's not like I'm schizophrenic. I just have two forces and I've got to follow one over the other. And by the way, Tanya teaches us that it can never be a time when they are both on top. And that's what we're going to see with the story of Yaakov and Esav. That Rivka went to a prophet. Who did she go to? Imagine this woman goes to a prophet and she is told that you have twins. But not only do you have twins, you have two nations that will become great nations. Now, everything in the Torah is formative. It all is like laying the groundwork for history. But it's pretty scary to hear that as a mother. Like, you will have two different nations and they will be at loggerheads. And when one will be up, the other will be down. When one will be down, the other will be up. And hopefully the younger one will be on top of the older one more often than not. That's what they tell him. The younger one will be on top of the older one. Nonetheless, when the elder and his descendants will always serve the younger and his descendants. That was the prophecy. And who gave this prophecy? Who gave this prophecy? Now, Elijah wasn't around yet. That was much later. But Shem, that was written there. Good catch. So Shem was the son of Noah. Son of Noah, who was still alive. And he was a holy man. He was a holy person. That's why I mentioned last week we're called Shemites, because we all come from Shem. Those who are against Shem are anti-Shemites. So that's where that comes from. That's where that comes from. So we descend from Shem, but not only do we descend from him physically, just like the beginning of this week's Torah portion that says, Ben Avraham Holid, that we are descendants physically, but we also taught and received the teachings of Shem that he got from Noah. And the difference was that Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov took it to the world, while Shem just sort of kept it to himself. It was like on a need-to-know basis. If you came up to him and asked him a question, he would tell you, but he wasn't going out spreading the word. He was like, I'm not going to be Mr. Unpopular. But he taught it to Yitzchak, he taught it to Avraham. And here, in this case, he also taught it to Rivka and said, this is the future of your descendants. So Rivka knew from the get-go, and it's possible that she didn't share this with Yitzchak, that the younger one was going to serve the older. And that was the epitome, that was the ideal scenario. Now, if you look at history, you have to be brutally honest, it seems like the older has controlled the younger for much more of history. Esav, who is Esav? Esav was the older one. He came out hairy and strong and red, and it was a fighter, an aggressive child, even from birth. He would become a hunter, a destroyer, conqueror. So his role was to take over nations. And he did that. Who was the descendants of Esav? The Roman Empire. Descended from Esav, direct line by line by line, it tracked to the beginning of Rome. Who was the Roman Empire? The Roman Empire ended up being Europe. And we know it today. Europe is Western civilization. The Western civilization is represented by the President of the United States at the moment. You want to know who the epitome of Esav is today? Esav is represented by, because there's no Rome anymore, there's no Roman Empire, by the leader of the Western world. And that's Europe, the European world. Now, you have Russians, you have Mongolians, you have Chinese, you have Arabs, you have Africans. All those have ancestors in the Torah that are not Esav. The only ones that you could track directly Esav is to that lineage. So if you look through history, Christians, the Romans, go through Europeans, Crusaders, Cossacks. We were under the thumb of Esav for centuries of our history. Well, what would you say? Maybe there was 200 years that we had the best time in Israel under King Solomon and other times of the kings after that, Chizkiyahu. Like it was a small pocket of window of time. So this is where we know that we are at a blip in human history. What we've seen is just a small tip of the iceberg. And one day, what will happen, as is prophesied, Esav will turn around to Yaakov, as we saw in this story, next week's Torah portion, 2 weeks, and says, Yaakov, I recognize that you got the blessings, you have the position, you've deserved it, you earned it. And what we see is what's called Tov Sheba Esav. The good of Esav starts to come to the fore and allows Yaakov to prosper, and allows Yaakov to thrive, allows him to have Israel, allows him to be successful, and to have all of the goodness that Yaakov had imparted to the world now also be imparted through Esav. According to the Rebbe's teachings, that's already started to happen with the fact that the Western world has been imbued by Yaakov's teachings. The fact that the rest of the world not only allowed Yaakov in, which is what happened in America in the 1770s, they said religious freedom for all, including Yaakov, you're welcome in our big tent, which was the first step. The second step was, we're going to take your teachings and apply them to our way of life. Call it Judeo-Christian values, but in essence, it's the teachings of Yaakov, Yisrael. And so that's where the Rebbe said it already started to happen. But we can see it maybe happening even more with presidents of the United States saying, Israel, you should do this, Israel, you should do that, you should be able to, practice not only freely, but be victorious in your battles and so on. Esav was never like that. Esav was like, stop, I control you. Completely under my thumb. I don't want you to ever have success. So what's interesting is that we haven't seen these days of the prophet Shem saying that there'll be times when, most of the time, when the younger will be over the older. And so when the coming of Mashiach comes, we'll get to see it, and that will last for centuries and millennia, and much longer than the exile has lasted. So this is all a lot for Rivka to take in. She's hearing this whole prophecy, and she's like, well, okay, I didn't ask for this. But she has this big responsibility. Now, when she gave birth, it was an interesting thing that happened. So Esav comes out first, and look at the top of page 157. He emerged ruddy, important that he would be a shedder of blood, full of hair all over him. He had hair all over his body already. They called him Esav. Completed, Asui. That's what the name Esav means. He was already almost like he's a grown man, the way he was born. And the name stuck. The brother emerged, and his hand was grabbing Esav's heel. Why? Because he wanted to be the firstborn. He was already, Yaakov from the get-go, didn't like, even subconsciously as a baby, didn't like the fact that he was going to be second and have to deal with contending with his older brother for the birthright. So he's grabbing. Now, I've actually seen that when babies are born, they're grabbing. They have a very strong grasp of things, even from a very early age, like a few hours old. They're already able to grab things. And it makes sense that he could have easily been grabbing his heel, and he was. So when they saw him grabbing the heel, what's the word for heel in Hebrew? Akev, the heel. So they said, we're going to name you Yaakov, because you're grabbing the heel of your brother. Yaakov means the heel. It makes sense in a few weeks from now why Yaakov's name was changed from Yaakov to Yisrael. Because Yaakov is the one who's always trying to grab for ascendancy, but he feels lower. And he's always trying to replace Esav. And by the way, there's no greater cause of anti-Semitism than when Esav thinks Yaakov is trying to replace me. He's trying to take over. He's trying to become the influencer of my country and my world. That's the cause of anti-Semitism. Esav is nervous. Why is Yaakov grabbing my heel all the time? Why does he want my position? Why does he want my... Just be where you are. No other country is grabbing my heel. No other nation is grabbing my heel. Yishmael is not grabbing my heel. Others aren't grabbing my heel. But because Yaakov has this insinuation of trying to take Esav's place. Esav wanted to kill him. Now, it continued on. What happens next? He wants the birthright from him. So one day, when they're a little younger, in their teens, Esav's out hunting, comes back, he's starving, and Yaakov's making lentil soup. Why is he making lentil soup? That was the day Avraham had passed away. This last week's portion, Avraham passed away. Yaakov and Esav were 13 years old at the time, bar mitzvah boys, when Avraham passed away. And till then, Avraham had nachas. He saw his son had 2 children, and he knew the continuation was happening. And even though Esav was born a little interesting, but he didn't show his prowess. He didn't show his aggressive nature until after his bar mitzvah. That day of his bar mitzvah, Esav was out in the field, and he actually killed Nimrod. Remember Nimrod? He was the king that Avraham had some contentious issues with when he smashed down all the idols. Nimrod was the king at the time who threw him in the furnace and said, "Get out of here." Esav went and avenged his grandfather. And he killed him. He also took from him the coat. That was a very special coat. It was Adam's coat that had the scent of the Garden of Eden. Now, apparently, when you wore this coat, animals would come to you, and it was very easy to hunt because they were attracted to the scent. And so he was desperate for the coat, maybe more than avenging his grandfather. And he got the coat, and he walks in, and he says, As much as I killed this Nimrod, I didn't get any game, and I'm starving. Can I have some of that soup? I need it. I'm going to die. So Yaakov says, that's fine, but you have to give me the birthright. You have to make me the oldest child. He says, fine. The oldest child. Look at what he says. Top of page 159. Yaakov then gave Esav some bread and lentil stew. He ate and drank. He got up and left. And thus Esav spurned his birthright. He said to Yaakov, he said, you keep it, I don't need it. Because what's the point of a birthright if I'm going to die of starvation anyway? And he gave it up.
Meaning to the lentil soup.
So it says that when someone passes away, you're supposed to have a meal. He had set up the meal for his father, that he should have the Sudas Havara. There is something to be said for the legumes, that there is either they're earthly products, they come from the earth, but they grow. So even when someone passes away, there's still a growth that comes from that. They haven't fully died because there's still natural organic growth that can come, similar to leguminous plants that grow from the ground. So there is that element, but it was interesting that it was red lentil soup. And what does it say afterwards? It says that because he had this, actually right before, because he sold his birthright and he gave it away, so it said that he became known, because of this red lentil soup, he became known as Edom, the red one, from that day on. And now what's interesting is, he was already red before then, but he got this nickname from the lentil soup that he ate. It's, there was a judge, Bedford County. His last name was Lynch, and he was known as a great judge, but there was one case that he messed up, or he let someone go and caused a lynching, that they allowed the mob to come and lynch this person, this guilty perpetrator. So he got this name because of his faulty judgment. He got this name as what they did to this person was a lynching because of the judge Lynch, who had orchestrated or caused it to happen. So I forgot the details of the story, but he was complaining afterwards, like, most of my cases, 99% of my cases, I ruled fairly and I adjudicated in an honorable way. The one time I didn't, I get named I am the one who, when someone is lynched, it's on my resume, it's on my history, it's on my legacy. And so that's the story. The story is that yes, one time you do something, one time you have that showing of you ate that food instead of holding on to the birthright. You basically showed us who you are. You care more about the food and the physical than you do about the spiritual, and that becomes the story. It's like somebody says, it's like most of my life I never killed anybody. So why am I such a bad guy? Why am I such a bad guy? There's one time I killed somebody. Yes. But that's what happens. There's one moment in our lives that becomes us. There's another story.
Well, he could have changed it, like the Nobel Peace Prize.
Exactly.
He
Yeah.
was known for TNT, and he said, "No, I
Right.
don't want to be known."
Right.
That was
But it's
a lie.
very hard to do. It's very hard to do. But Asaph could have done it. And the story is told there was a this fellow's name was the labor secretary of Ronald Reagan. He was the labor secretary in the cabinet. His name was Donovan, and he was accused of having ties with the mob. And so they took him in front of congressional hearings, and this and that. In the end, he was acquitted. No ties with the mob. Nothing was proven. And they say, all right, when you finish with this room, you can go to this room, and they'll sign the papers signing your acquittal. And he said, and which room do I go to get my reputation back? Yeah. And so at the end of the day, it's so easy to get that name, that nickname, Edom, you're a guy who ate red stuff because you were more hungry than you cared about your birthright and your blessings. And that's easy, and that sticks, but it's very hard to do what Nobel did. It's very hard to do what people have a very hard time doing, which is saying that can be the catalyst for a complete turnaround, because once you have that, that's what people know you as.
That's what
John
newspapers
Ponzi.
do.
Yeah.
Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
I don't think he was a bad guy. It just went wrong, went awry.
Yeah.
Now everything's a Ponzi scheme.
Or newspapers,
Right.
they correct it, but it's a little
Right, tiny
article
correction.
on an
I always
inside page.
said, and I heard this from a teacher of mine, the correction has to be double the size
It should be.
of the headline that said it. Like if the headline of the front page, take the whole front page, the correction. That's, it's like, otherwise you're like this guy who was told, he called the guy a thief in shul. He said, you're a thief, right? And so the rabbi said, you've got to now get up in front of everybody and say that I'm mistaken. He wasn't a thief. I shouldn't have said that. Right? So once you're doing it publicly, you've got to say it publicly even more so. So the story is that the guy went up and said, I called this guy a thief. And I was wrong. Shouldn't have said that. Shouldn't have said that. Right, under his breath. No, the other one was, he said, get up there and say he's not a thief. Get up there and say he's not a thief. So he got up there and he said, so-and-so and so-and-so is not a thief? Like he asked it like that. He said, he's not a thief? So the guy says, that's not how you're supposed to say it. He's like, I'm not a cantor. I don't know how to sing. I can't.
All about punctuation.
Right. Like wrong punctuation kills people.
Uh-huh.
Like, let's eat grandma or let's eat grandma. It's like, it's very dangerous. Very dangerous. Like slow children crossing or slow children crossing. There's every scenario you could, and that's why the Torah is all in the written law. It must have the oral law to accompany it, because otherwise you're reading things completely wrong. Unless you have the punctuation, which was taught by the oral law. There was a fellow who once came to Hillel and says, teach me the Torah without any of the rabbi's commentaries, without any commentaries from the rabbi. So he's like, okay, all right. Teaches him the first paragraph. And at the end of the first paragraph, it says, Vayihi erev, vayihi boker, yom echad. It was evening and it was morning, one day, beginning of creation. Right. Comes back the next day, he says, let's just review what we learned yesterday. Vayihi erev, it was evening, vayihi bakar, and it was in the cold, yom echad, one day. Because bakar, kar means cold, bakar, in the cold. He says, wait, you told me yesterday that it was boker, it was evening, it was morning, and that's why we start the holidays and Shabbat in the evening and then have morning. He says, no, it's only if the evening is cold, then it's one day. He says, oh, okay. Comes back the next day, he says, wait, there's another explanation. Vayihi erev, it was evening. Bakar, there was cattle. Yom echad, one day, because bakar is cattle also. It's all with the same Hebrew letters, just with the different vowels underneath it. He says, oh, is it evening? Is it cold or is it cattle? He says, well, that's why you need me. That's why you need the oral law. Because you just have the written law, you don't even have the vowels, you don't even know what it means. So if you're going to trust me to teach you the Torah the right way, like, yeah, we have the translation here, but all this translation here is the teachings of the rabbis. Lo tevashel gedi b'chalav chelev imo. So it says, don't cook a goat in its mother's chet lamed vet. Chet lamed vet is chalav, which is milk, but chet lamed vet is also a word chelev, which is fat. So if we didn't have the rabbis to tell us that it's chalav, not chelev, we would not be eating any fatty meats. No fried foods at all, but we'd be having cheeseburgers, but just with very lean cheeseburgers, right? Because that's all.
Cholesterol would be low.
Very lean, but that's because the rabbis interpreted what was taught to Moses and what Moses taught to everybody else. So you must have the oral law to teach. And that's the same way with so many things with regards to obviously punctuation, but other things as well. So that's just a little side topic which we once discussed at great length on Shavuos night. But this is now Yitzchak. Esav is showing his true colors. From that point on, he became a wild hunter. But I want to touch on one thing because it's really, really important. And that is that if you look at what happens, because we just passed over it very, very quickly on verse 28 on 157. So here it says, Isaac loved Esav for the game he provided, because he was deceived by his cunning words, while Rivka loved Yaakov. So first of all, just on a simple translation, is parents are paying favorites, right? And it happens that some parents have a leaning towards one child over the other, but the Torah doesn't reveal that to us on any other person except for with Yitzchak and also with Yaakov, that it says he loved Joseph more than the other brothers. But why would Yitzchak love Esav more, favoritism aside, when he was clearly, overtly not interested in the teachings of Yitzchak or Avraham? He was a hunter, he was a wild man. And Yaakov, it says, Ishtam Yoshev Ahalim. Look at the verse before that. As they grew up, Esav was a man in the fields, and he was wild, and he was a hunter. He killed people. He certainly had no qualms hurting and injuring animals. And Yaakov was a man in the tents who would sit and study all day and learn Torah as much as he could. No Torah yet. He would learn spiritual ideas. Why would Yitzchak have this leaning? What do you think? What do you think Yitzchak would? Yeah, that's a good thought. And perhaps that's the reason why Rivka loved Yaakov more, because she said, okay, Yitzchak, you don't know bad guys. I know bad guys because I grew up with them. I grew up with Lavan. I grew up with Betuel. And a rotten apple is a rotten apple. And there's nothing you can do about it. I'm not giving up on Esau, but I can't focus my energy on saying he's going to be the continuation of these Jewish teachings. Because she saw that if someone goes down that path, they're down that path. Yitzchak said exactly what you're saying. I can't give up on him. I think actually Yaakov's going to be fine, but if I somehow turn Esav around, then maybe he'll use all of his talents that is right now being channeled. So it's a word that a lot of educated use. We've got to channel his energy from the negative stuff, from fooling around, to being able, and that's why, by the way, a lot of kids who misbehave in school, when they do channel their energy, become unbelievably successful. What do they say? The A students in school are working for the C and D students in the big businesses, because those guys became the top CEOs, these guys who are just running around inventing things, walking around in t-shirts and jeans. They can't think They can't sit still for more than a minute, but they're getting things done. And the lawyers and accountants and all the A students, they're just working for them. Is working for those guys, the head of Amazon, head of Facebook, head of Google, all these things. These guys none of them graduated college. On Musk, what's his name, Zuckerberg, right? What's his name, Bezos, Zuckerberg? None of them graduated. They just were just constantly moving, constantly trying to get things done. So Yitzchak saw that if I can somehow harness that unbelievable energy that he's showing in his violence and aggression, I could turn this guy around. But it's even more than that. It's even more than that. They knew that there has to be a dual threat. That if Yaakov and Esav somehow can work together, there's no stopping them. Because Esav will take over the physical, and he'll be the one who provides. It's like the one who goes into business and makes all the money, and it provides for the spiritual one who sits and learns and connects to God all day and prays for his brother and says, I'm going to spiritually take care of you. One hand washing the other, but there has to be at least somewhat of an allegiance from the physical brother to say, I care about the spiritual things. So Yitzchak perhaps was just trying to hold on to Esav. Come in. I thought the class was staying. Oh, I know that it's a lesson. I'm having it at 8:45. Oh. Hey, come on in. Just take a seat on the couch. We're just finishing the class. About mitzvahs this weekend. So we're gonna do practice, yeah. Sophia. So that was the hope of Yitzchak, but there's even more. In the words, why? Because it doesn't say why Rivka loved Yaakov. It just says Rivka loved Yaakov. But the Torah gives a reason why Yitzchak loved Esav. Isaac loved Esav for the game he provided. Kitzayid befiv, that was in his mouth. Now, here translates it as the cunning words, because he put on a good show, Esav. He put on a good show. He said, Dad, tell me what the law is when I'm supposed to do this. Tell me how I'm supposed to be eating. Tell me how I'm supposed to be behaving. Right? So his dad was like, oh, man, he's a good guy. Rashi says he would ask him like questions on how to tithe and how to give charity from all the things that he conquered. And so Yitzchak was like, I was sort of tricked by my son. Remember, Yitzchak was going blind because it says that Yitzchak lost his eyesight at a younger age, couldn't see that well, and as he got older, it got worse and worse. Some say from the Akedah, it says when he was looking up and the angels were crying and caused his eyes to deteriorate. But be that as it may, it seems to imply that Esav was tricking him. I don't think that Ramban brings out a much more beautiful interpretation I'd like to share with you tonight to conclude. The Ramban is Nachmanides. Nachmanides is one of the great codifiers in the 13th century. He was known famously for a dispute that he had with Pablo Cristiani in front of King James of Aragon. He won the debate, but he lost the debate. Because when a Jew won the debate, they had to leave to get out of there. So you lost either way. But he has a famous book that he printed called The Refutation, which is the book on the dispute that he had, proving that Judaism was the correct religion over Christianity. And he had a lot of other very powerful stories in his life. But Nachmanides sounds similar to Maimonides, but they lived in different places and different times. And he says a beautiful interpretation. He says, the fact that it says that he was tricked by the mouth, by the game that was in his mouth, actually doesn't say tricked. It says for the game he provided, means that what did Esav love more than anything else? Esav loved more than anything else going hunting. And so the basic translation of this is he loved what he would bring home. He loved the food that he would hunt. And he would say, oh, can you make me delicacies? Can you make me some of that meat? I love it. It's delicious. And if you look later on when they come for the blessing, he says, Esav, before I give you a blessing, please make for me delicious food. And so Esav went hunting, and that allowed Yaakov to come in and get the blessing earlier. Because Esav went out. It was like Yitzchak loved Esav's food more than anything. Now, Yitzchak was not a guy who was into food. So why would he have loved Esau because he made him great barbecue ribs? Just because he did a good steak? He loved him? Was he that into food? I mean, now today Jews might be, but back then Yitzchak was probably not that way inclined.
Try to honor his brother by showing that he appreciates his skill set, but just acknowledging.
Oh, that's what the Ramban says.
Yeah.
Exactly what the Ramban says. The Ramban says as follows, and I'll read you the words
Wow.
to his son. So first,
That was great.
yeah. So this is what the Ramban said. This is his words. Isaac loved Esau because of the game in his mouth should be understood literally. Game was always in Yitzchak's mouth. All day he craved to eat hunted animals. And these were always in his mouth. He wouldn't eat anything else. He wouldn't eat vegetables. He wouldn't eat fruit. He wouldn't eat bread. He just would have whatever Esau made him. Since he always has game in his mouth, he always ate this food. This was his passion all day. Naturally, he loved Esau. He said, this guy's providing me all the meat. So of course I love him. This is a boy who arranged meat all the time. But it seems that that's derogatory towards Yitzchak. So he explains as follows. The Ramban is teaching us that while Jacob was a wholesome child and dwelling in tents, Yitzchak naturally knew how to bond with Yaakov. I learn with him some spiritual things. He's bonding with me and I'm bonding with him. And that's my natural state. But for bonding with Esau, Yitzchak was like, I don't know how to do it. I have nothing in common with this son. So he acquired a taste. And he said, I'm going to learn how to enjoy the meat so that when he comes back with his hunting and his food and his game, I have an opportunity to bond with my son. And I can show him I love what you love. And through this, we will have a loving relationship that might grow and become a little bit more. The story told the Baba of a Rebbe, there's a guy in Crown Heights, I don't know if he's still alive actually. When I was a student in 770, next to my basement where I stayed on Empire Boulevard, there was like a small little kosher grocery. There's a big kosher groceries down Kingston Avenue, but it wasn't so convenient to schlep stuff. So I would go to the small kosher grocery, 3 aisles, little fridge section, and there was a guy, a Baba of a Chassid, and he was learning the Talmud all day at the counter. And his name was Lustig, I think, last name. I always ask him how he's doing. And he told me a story that when he was a kid in yeshiva before the war, that he was 14, his teacher told him, he said, I want you to do something that you've probably never done before. I'd like you to go with this boy. I'd like you to take him skiing on the Carpathian Mountains. Skiing? Never been skiing before. I'm a student. I'm in yeshiva. I don't go skiing. So the rabbi told him, he said, listen, there's a boy who came to the yeshiva recently. He's an orphan, and he's feeling very homesick. He wants to go home to his uncle. We're trying to keep him in yeshiva. So I asked him, I said, what do you enjoy doing? He said, before my parents died, they took us skiing a few times, and I really enjoyed it. So the rabbi of the yeshiva said, I'll get someone to go skiing with you. And he told this guy, Lustig, he said, you seem like an active, healthy guy. I want you to take him skiing. He said, I've never been skiing before in my life. He said, you'll learn. Took him skiing about 7 or 8 times that winter. And he learned how to ski himself, and this kid loved it. Came back, he was so excited that someone was taking him skiing, and he was going skiing, and he was enjoying himself. He came back, and he got more excited in the yeshiva as well, and he acclimated himself to the yeshiva. A couple years later, Nazis came through where they were, rounded up everybody. Interestingly, he told the story that one time one of the Nazis, while they were taking him, were having fun with the Jews during the snow. They were taking them from the top of a very high area, it was like a mountain, and telling them, we're going to throw you down. If you survive, you survive. If not, not. And he said he used his skiing techniques that he learned to be able to survive. He wasn't afraid of heights. He wasn't afraid of the snow. He wasn't afraid of steep inclines. And he survived because his teacher told him to take him skiing. That was a side point. But what he told me was that he realized from that moment that it's not always about just trying to tell the student, you have to do this according to the class regimen, according to the system that we have. It's about finding out what they love and letting them know you love that also, so that they feel a real bonding to you. And then the rest opens up. And what an amazing thing for Yitzchak to say, I don't like meat that much, but I'm going to learn to love meat so I can have what to talk about with my son and tell him, yeah, you got that meat, you got this good meat, you got the goat today, you got the deer, oh, venison, I love venison. And even to get the blessing, he would, to show him that he couldn't do it without having that opportunity to bond with him first. And Esav grabbed it. Esav said, sure, Dad, I'd love to go and do that for you. Now, we'll talk about it later on, maybe on Shabbos, where it all went a bit awry, because at the end, Yaakov got the blessing and not Esav. And Esav, then, his tendency was just to exact revenge on his brother for that. But the idea that we can really take from this is don't sit on your high horse. Don't sit on a pedestal. Go down to really bond with a child, with a friend, with a student on a level that they appreciate it and they love. If your kids love sports, learn sports. Learn how to play sports. Learn how to follow the football. And you'll chat with them about it, and you'll talk to them about it, and you'll have that opportunity to connect in a real way, and then the rest will grow from there. But why should they always be the one climbing up to your standards and climbing up to what you love and climbing up to the things? I don't like that, Dad. I don't like it. I never was able to learn. And Esav knew that Yitzchak knew that about Esav. He knew that he couldn't be like Yaakov. He said, I'm not going to lose him. I'm not going to lose him. So really pretty powerful stuff that the Ramban shares, that how much he was able to do this. Just finish with this story. The child, unfortunately, was growing up in a home, it was a loving home. Parents loved him, treated him very well, but they couldn't deal with the fact that he was getting bullied at school. They didn't really know what to do. And they tried, but he got worse and worse, and he reacted in a very bad way, and eventually he just ran away from home. He ran away from home at the age of 14. And his parents were devastated, crying. They knew, he was on his own. They tried finding him. They tried looking for him. Anyway, that was about 2 years later. 2 years later, one day, the door opens, and the boy walks in. 16-year-old boy walks in. And there was this unbelievable moment of reunion and acceptance coming back. And the mom said, I have something for you. He smelled it. He said, it smells like cinnamon buns. How did you know today to make cinnamon buns? They're my favorite of all the things that you make for me. And she said, I've been making cinnamon buns every day just in case you come through the door. You come back home, you'll have that feeling that you are loved and you're welcomed.